So the star feminist of the gaming world, one Anita Sarkeesian, the one who got about $160,000 to make some videos critical of video games, has a new video up. That makes about 5 videos in 2 years. That's an amazing production rate of about 1 video every 5 months. An average video production cost of about $30,000 per video. Well, surely that must just reflect the pure elite caliber of the scholar modern feminists have financially chosen to be the face of modern feminism in gaming. Right? Well, let's see what she's got for us this time.
Compounding the problem is the widespread belief that, despite all the evidence, exposure to media has no real-world impact.
Despite all of the evidence to the contrary? Really? You mean like the way that billions of people are killed in video games? Billions! And there is no effect whatsoever on the murder statistics. Is that the profound evidence that video games affect our behavior? Or are the statistics in denial as well? I mean, surely she's not suggesting that if someone plays a game like, say, Alien vs. Predator, that you're more likely to hunt people for sport and collect their skulls for trophies.
While it may be comforting to think that we all have a personal force field protecting us from outside influences, this is simply not the case. Scholars sometimes refer to this type of denial as the third-person effect, which is the tendency for people to believe that they are personally immune to media's effects, even if others may be influenced or manipulated. Paradoxically, and somewhat ironically, those who most strongly believe that media is just harmless entertainment are also the ones most likely to uncritically internalize harmful media messages. In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
Bullshit. And I mean pure, unrefined, Category 5 moron juice bullshit. But how can I say that, I hear you ask? Why, of course, because immediately after the game Grand Theft Auto was initially released, the one where you got a special bonus for mowing down a string of people dressed as, say, Elvis or Hare Krishnas, there was a dramatic increase in the number of hit-and-run mass murders of Hare Krishnas and Elvis impersonators because...
While it may be comforting to think that we all have a personal force field protecting us from outside influences, this is simply not the case. In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
Oh no, wait, no there wasn't, because you're talking bullshit. You see, no matter how much Anita needs there to be a connection between playing video games and their behavior in reality, because let's be real, if there wasn't, the entire premise of the series that she got feminists to give her $160,000 to explore would be bullshit. Which, of course, it is. Because you don't have to be Einstein to realize that if such a correlation existed, then with the amount of video games currently played, it would be outrageously obvious. You know, if what Anita said is true, that...
In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
Then after the game Hitman was released, you would have expected a dramatic increase in fiber wire stranglings. And there wasn't. And after the game Burnout was released, you would have expected to have seen a dramatic increase in the number of people trying to cause as much damage as possible in a suicidal car wreck. And we didn't. All following the release of the latest Grand Theft Auto game, because...
In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
There was a massive influx of people trying to sleep with prostitutes to regain their health. Oh yeah, that's right, no there wasn't. Because Anita is simply talking Category 5 bullshit here. So how could she possibly make these claims about this connection being so well academically established?
In other words, viewing media that frames women as objects or sexual playthings profoundly impacts how real-life women are perceived and treated in the world around us.
Well, obviously in these videos, which cost 30,000 feminist dollars to make, and that she wants to be used for educational purposes.
Feminist frequency videos have been used in middle school, high school, and university classrooms. They've been integrated into the curriculum of media studies, gender studies, and law school programs. Parents have even reached out to me saying that they used my videos to spark discussions with their kids about representations of women in the media.
She must show how well researched this is.
As you might imagine, this project requires an enormous amount of research. This is an incredibly ambitious project because of the scope and scale of the research and production involved.
And clearly cite the work that she's talking about, right? Well, no. She makes no mention of it whatsoever in her video. None. Nada. Zip. That is, if you were to only watch this video, the only evidence presented is her word for it. Well, okay, let's read the video description. Nope, nothing there that looks even remotely like an academic study. But there is a link to her webpage where you get a dozen or so links. Well, the first link is just to a talk, which basically describes how everything is a subject or an object.
We're thinking about the object-subject dichotomy. Subjects act, objects are acted upon.
And then arbitrarily declares that because women are basically objects, therefore it's all sexism, without realizing that you can play this exact same word game and equally well declare that all men are objects, and so on. But more on that later. The second is just some blog. The third is a link to a chapter on a book, which starts with a quote from Anita Sarkeesians. And let me just give you a quote from Dworkin such that we're clear of the great feminist minds that we're dealing with here. But the hatred of women is a source of sexual pleasure for men in its own right. Intercourse appears to be the expression of that contempt in its pure form. Intercourse is the pure, sterile, formal expression of men's contempt for women. And so it goes on. Reference 4 is just some book. Reference 5 is some blog from which I'll read the first comment. Ben, I find it hard to agree with your premise regarding violence and sex workers when most games have you slaughtering hundreds, if not thousands of bad guys, often in amazingly gory and vivid ways. To which the author just shows how well plugged into reality he is by replying, "Yep, when you murder someone in a gory ways in real life, you get punished. The law works. When a prostitute is beaten, raped, or murdered, you have lawyers arguing that it's no big deal, or it's just never reported."
Sometimes areas may go on high alert for a few minutes, during which players have to lay low or hide before the game and its characters forget that you just murdered a sexualized woman in cold blood.
Nah, Ben. You gun down a prostitute in the streets like in these games, you will be locked up and in parts of America, executed. I mean, let's look at this another way. If you really believed what you were saying here, and someone did say go on a prostitute killing spree, you would have to consider that they were not actually responsible for their actions because it was the computer game that made them do it. I mean, no one kicked up a fuss when they killed a prostitute in this video game. How could you possibly hold them responsible for doing it in real life when it was the game that made them do it? Sadly, no, Ben. You are just unplugged from reality if you think that no one takes murdering, beating, or raping a prostitute in the streets seriously. So I gave up with Anita's list about halfway through, at which point I had found only 2 quasi-academic studies. And I say quasi because in both cases the sample size was less than 100 people and they were not selected for being gamers. I mean, from a sample size that tiny, you really can't tell much unless it's a really black and white issue, in which case it would be so bloody obvious from the sheer number of people who play video games that there would be no point in doing a study of this size at all. The first basically got people to play female characters dressed in an overtly sexy manner. And then stunningly afterwards, people were more tolerant to see how men might mistake people's intentions if they dressed like that. And yes, the words willingness to accept rape myths raises its head several times, which should give you some insight into the objectivity of the authors. Well, yeah, that was a stunning and almost completely irrelevant observation. The second study was even more comical. It got people to play games like Pac-Man, The Sims, or basically an interactive porn fantasy game. And stunningly, the people who had been primed by the porn fantasy game recognized sexual words faster than those who hadn't been playing it. Yeah, wow, Anita. From a sample size of about 200 people who were not selected for being gamers. And from these 2 irrelevant studies, you have concluded that there is an obvious and well-known academic correlation between playing these games and having a negative long-term effect on your behavior.
Compounding the problem is the widespread belief that, despite all the evidence, exposure to media has no real-world impact.
Yeah, I can see why you were keen not to actually mention the details of those studies in your video, and instead just jump to the mind-blowingly stupid conclusion that,
in short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
Well, that was $30,000 well spent. Now, it's a big irony here that me, personally, think that women should be able to do what they want with their bodies. You know, that women should be treated as responsible adults, exactly the same as everyone else. If they want to sell sex, that's fine. That's their choice. They are grown adults. Anita, however, simply does not accept that women can willingly make a grown-up and responsible decision to sell sex or sexual imagery. This is how she expresses it.
Since objects can be bought and sold, it follows that once women have been turned into objects, their bodies and sexuality can also be bought and sold.
Dear God, not with this bloody object speak again. Okay, let's deal with this. This is the typical path that feminists walk to discover everything is sexist. First, they reduce everything to either subjects or objects.
This is via what's called the subject-object dichotomy. In the simplest terms, subjects act and objects are acted upon.
Then they only look at women and decide that they're objects, and that therefore they are dehumanized, and therefore society is evil and sexist.
Since these women are just objects, there's no need or reason for players to have any emotional engagement with them. The dehumanization caused by objectification inevitably leads us to the concept of disposability. Once a person is reduced to the status of objecthood, violence against that object becomes intrinsically permitted.
However, in reality, anyone doing a job is by their definition an object. They are being acted on by whomever is supplying the money. In this sense, when a feminist talks about subject-object dichotomies, well, we already have language for this. We call it the employer-worker dichotomy. Indeed, it actually makes a lot more sense if every time you hear a feminist use the word object, just substitute in there the word worker. That is, these are not fast food objects, they're fast food workers. And these are not sex objects.
Well, sex objects have little to no individual personality or identity to speak of.
But sex workers. Or looked at another way, fundamentally we're all whores in the subject-object dichotomy. In the employer-worker dichotomy. It's just we choose to sell our bodies for different things.
Well, you obviously have no interest in saving yourself.
Brad, for 14 years I've been a whore for the advertising industry. The only way I could save myself now is if I start firebombing.
Yes, saying subjects act and objects get acted upon, and therefore hiring someone to work for them is turning them into an object and therefore dehumanizing them.
Once a person is reduced to the status of objecthood, violence against that object becomes intrinsically permitted.
Is pretty retarded shit. And yes, this does seem to be a core of modern feminism.
We're thinking about the object-subject dichotomy. Subjects act, objects are acted upon.
This is via what's called the subject-object dichotomy. In the simplest terms, subjects act and objects are acted upon.
And the mere fact that they all believe such retarded shit gives you some insight into why they financially elected Anita Sarkeesian to be their most intellectual feminist on gaming.
And also video games. Like, I would love to play video games, but I don't want to go around shooting people and ripping off their heads, and it's just gross. So.
And yeah, this is why Anita needs women to be oppressed here, even though the only difference is the commodity being sold here is sex. You see, the core here is Anita wants women to be ashamed of selling sex or sexual imagery. And I think that if they want to make an informed decision to sell sex or sexual imagery, then that's fine. They are responsible adults, same as everyone else. And if that's their choice, then they are free to make it.
Remember the old cliche, you're better than porn.
Yeah.
You're better than porn.
I mean, what's better than porn, though? I'm not sure. Smart, educated people that love to have sex can do porn, too.
Right, and you are an educated person.
I am.
You've graduated high school.
Graduated high school.
You graduated...
Done with college.
And you got a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
A BS or a BA.
Biology.
So you got a BS in biology.
I mean, it just gets crazy. If Anita really wanted to view everything as objects, that's fine. I mean, this is how she views the strippers in the strip club.
Non-playable sex objects have little to no individual personality or identity to speak of, and almost never get to be anything other than set dressing or props in someone else's narrative. Since these women are just objects, there's no need or reason for players to have any emotional engagement with them. Meaningful relationships or interactions are not even possible.
What the hell? In real life, people go to strip clubs to buy sexual gratification of one sort or another. They don't go to develop meaningful relationships with the strippers. You know, if they wanted to develop meaningful relationships, they would probably be dating rather than going to a strip club. So why would you expect to be able to develop meaningful relationships with the strippers in a game? In fact, it would be my reckoning that there would be few things that would creep a stripper out more than asking personal things about them. You know, that's kind of the whole purpose of stage names. But let's take another look at this strip club from the subject-object dichotomy, shall we? Using your own criteria, Anita, for what classes as objects and what are subjects. And we'll see who is really being dehumanized in this strip club. Well, let's take another pop critical look at this, shall we, Anita? Another way would be that strip clubs are a place where women are free agents. They choose to go and dance and take money off cash dispensing objects. Remember, subjects act, objects are acted upon. Well, by your standards, this list, let's see who is the object here.
I've identified a number of fundamental aspects of objectification, including instrumentality, commodification, interchangeability, violability, and disposability.
Well, let's go down the list. Instrumentality. Well, these men are clearly just being used as a money dispensing instrument. Check. Commodification. Yep, they're just being used as a commodity, a resource. Check. Interchangeability. Referring to their cash dispensing objects as Johns. Yep. Check. Violability. Yeah, it's perfectly okay to throw them out if they don't fulfill their primary cash dispensing role. Or if they don't obey the rules set by the subjects, then these objects are perfectly disposable. Which brings us on to disposability. Damn straight, once they have emptied their wallets, they're simply discarded. And like all discarded objects, no one cares about them after that. These men have been systematically dehumanized, Anita. They are simply reduced to the level of non-participatory, agency-free, cash-dispensing objects. Wow! I never knew how much hatred of men there was in these games until I used feminist frequency-style pop critic analysis methods. Basically, all of this subject-object crap is a manipulative word game to end up at the intended and bogus conclusion that men don't view women as human, and therefore sexism! All in the hope that no one will think about it too much, which in the case of feminists is a pretty good hope. Else they might realize that this exact same reasoning could be used to show that any job is actually an act of dehumanization, and therefore these people are simply being reduced to the level of objects. But no, for Anita, when a woman takes charge of her life and makes the informed decision that she's going to make millions of dollars posing for a camera, she's just an object. She might as well be an inanimate object, like a couch, because we always give inanimate objects we've dehumanized $1 million paychecks.
And so we compete with other women for our own self-esteem because we see it as this finite resource, this cherished finite resource. So we go into parties and we know where we are in the pretty girl pecking order, and when another woman is valued for being a sex object, it actually makes us feel bad about ourselves.
Now, for me, it's just bloody common sense. If you're a beautiful, young, sexually appealing woman, there are many more doors open for you than a young, sexually appealing man.
The real way that I became a model is I won a genetic lottery, and I am the recipient of a legacy. We have defined beauty not just as health and youth and symmetry that we're biologically programmed to admire. And this is a legacy that was built for me, and it's a legacy that I've been cashing out on.
And frankly, only an idiot would not take advantage of that.
No, not yet. I'm only 25.
What up, Chew Toys? Cienega here, tightening the hose clamps for you bad girls.
But the free stuff that I get is the free stuff that I get in real life, and that's what we don't like to talk about. I was driving with my friend who was an awful driver, and she ran a red, and of course, we got pulled over. And all it took was a sorry officer, and we were on our way. I grew up in Cambridge, and one time I went into a store and I forgot my money and they gave me the dress for free. And I got these free things because of how I look, not who I am. And there are people paying a cost for how they look and not who they are. I won a genetic lottery.
The smarter ones might even see far enough ahead to realize that life will not always be that easy.
This speech that my mom gave me literally changed my life. I'll never forget it, and I'm so grateful for it. She told me, because I remember that summer I was all about like getting in shape. So I was like working out every day, whatever, and I was also
when you were
going
13?
This is 13, yes. And my mom was like, you think you're so cute working out, all you care about is your looks and how you dress, what you wear. You want to know something? Your beauty is going to be so temporary. One day you're going to be so unattractive and you're going to be dumb. And no one's gonna want you, and you're not gonna have anyone taking care of you. And I was like, holy...
Honest mom.
I was like, holy shit.
Casper is a regulator.
I love that speech that my mom gave me. That changed my life. And from that point forward, I was all about being an independent woman.
I should stress the fact that top female models earn about 20 times what a top male model does. Doubtless that's a fact that's eluded our favourite pop culture critic here, but primarily, it's not society that is discriminating there, but biology.
We have defined beauty not just as health and youth and symmetry that we're biologically programmed to admire.
Something that many of those who get terribly irate about the horror of a 15% wage gap, most of which boils down to differences in lifestyle choices, should bear in mind. Yes, it's biology that makes beautiful women worth about 20 times what beautiful men are worth.
And so even though our sexual objectification culture is more amplified, we see more images, and 96% of them are female.
Sure, it's all down to sexism and objectification and nothing to do with 50,000 years of biology dictating that young, beautiful women are more sexually attractive than older, ugly women. And fundamentally, this is why this sort of feminism is going to fail. Because no matter how much you use your pop critic, top feminist analysis skills to come to the conclusion that anyone who finds the woman on the left more beautiful or sexually attractive than the woman on the right is actually sexually objectifying her, and therefore is guilty of the most horrendous sexism, it won't make any difference whatsoever. Because fundamentally, you're not just trying to repeal some quirky human culture here, but trying to repeal human biology itself. Hell, you might as well be trying to teach lions to live off carrots.
The practice of using hypersexualized women as ornamental objects has been especially brazen in the racing game genre. Notice how the camera moves, how it focuses on and zooms in on specific body parts to highlight the aspects of women meant to be the most important.
My God, this pop critic has sharp skills. Yeah, that's quite right, Anita. The camera focuses on the sexual nature of the women, because in reality, the audience is mostly men. And if you want to get a man's attention quickly, beautiful girls is just the easiest way to do it. Actually, it's the best way to get the attention of women too, but that's a different story. But let's play this Anita Sarkeesian research game for a second here. I wonder why sexy women are used so much in racing games. Well, let's just do a quick Google search for racing girls. Wow. Yeah, beautiful women in racing games must be purely a sexist injection by the game designers, and it's got nothing to do with trying to emulate the real world of racing. Yeah, it's all down to the misogyny of the developers, Anita. It's got nothing to do with advertising or appealing to, say, a mostly male audience. I mean, we all know that this is nothing whatsoever to do with human biology, which is why both of these women would be equally good for advertising a racing game to a mostly male audience. You muppet. Yeah, like I say, $30,000 well spent. I mean, it goes off the rails in the first 6 seconds of the video.
Sorry, all booked up. Too bad, too, because I would have given a stud like you a free sample.
Now, for Anita, that's just turning a woman into an object. However, I see a different image in this video game scene. This woman is not only in control, she's the one calling the shots. She's the one making her sexual intentions plain, which personally I think is entirely healthy. She, unlike Anita, is clearly okay with women choosing what they want to do with their bodies. And in this case, that would be selling sex or having sex for fun. And it's even a bigger irony because later Anita claims that this is perpetuating the myth that women can't enjoy sex.
It frames female sexuality as something that belongs to others, rather than as something women enjoy for themselves.
Then later, when the woman is portrayed as going to have sex for fun, yeah, you guessed it, that's even more sexist.
If that wasn't bad enough,
Hi, sexy.
the player is then rewarded with sex as the dancer will go home with your character for successfully fondling them. These games systematize sexuality in ways that dehumanize women, essentially turning them into vending machines dispensing sex.
And with feminist role models like this. And yeah, a lot of people do look up to these munchkins, telling them that anyone who has sex with them is objectifying them. Is it any wonder that so many young girls end up with identity issues? But it's worse than merely saying that a young woman being portrayed as having sex for fun
Hi, sexy.
is actually dehumanizing her. I mean, let's just play a little role reversal with this clip, shall we?
Sorry, all booked up. Too bad, too, because I would have given a stud like you a free sample.
Hey, baby, sorry we're full. Shame, because you're such a fox. I would have given a hottie like you a free sample. To which our resident feminists would be losing their minds about. This is blatant sexual harassment. That's street harassment. That's not cool. Oh my god, that's so sexist. That's worse than asking me out for coffee in an elevator. Don't be that guy. Propositioning a woman for sex is not cool. It's not okay. And so on. Yeah. They're all small-minded social retards who need to be a hell of a lot more open-minded about the wide world. Anita also rails on how you can't have an intimate, personal relationship with the strippers in the dance club.
Since these women are just objects, there's no need or reason for players to have any emotional engagement with them. Meaningful relationships or interactions are not even possible.
Yeah, you can't find out anything about the men in the dance clubs either, or form intimate relationships with them, because people who are playing these games are not there to develop meaningful relationships with the non-playing characters. They're mostly there to play games like this because it's fun to pretend to be a gangster, which is why the overwhelming number of those non-playing characters are men, and you're just meant to kill them for cheap thrills over a beer and then sleep like a baby with a big smile on your face at that epic killing spree. And then of course it goes without saying, as with all Sarkeesian videos, that she makes the point that you can enjoy all media while still being critical of its more problematic aspects.
As always, please keep in mind that it's entirely possible to be critical of some aspects of a piece of media while still finding other parts valuable or enjoyable.
Unless, of course, it's one of her videos, and then it's always comments and ratings disabled. Way to practice what you preach there, Anita. And that's a shame, because when you find other responses to her videos, what you find is if you go through the comments, you'll find that she's just cherry-picked loads of scenes from games and completely misrepresented them. And she gets called for it over and over and over again. Which is why I did this parody of Anita's videos, because many a true word is spoken in jest. This has now been taken into a new realm with interactive media such as video games, where female protagonists are given a subliminal manual on how to destroy cars with a few swipes of a bat, and killing unsuspecting males by jumping on them from behind and launching into savage and unprovoked fatal attacks is seen as a good thing, something for fun. The game mechanics encourage this. The men are seen as nothing more than something to be shot, beaten, or blown up for fun. Men as target practice. Again, once the male has been reduced to the level of an object, it's okay to kill them. Yeah, that's just how badly Anita Sarkeesian misrepresents things in her $30,000 video. For example, in the game Hitman, where you kill people for cash. Now, I know there's going to be a bunch of feminist scholars out there who are really scratching their head at that one, using feminist theory, trying to work out whether Hitman is the subject or an object. I mean, he's clearly bought as an object for the purpose of killing others, so he's clearly an object, and therefore he's completely dehumanized. But he's also turning other people into objects, which of course makes them okay for him to kill them, which clearly makes him the subject.
But only a great fool would reach for what he was given. I'm not a great fool, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of you. But you must have known I was not a great fool. You would have counted on it, so I can clearly not choose the wine in front of me.
I mean, I'm not quite sure what to think here, but there's got to be sexism in there somewhere. Yeah, so in the game Hitman, most of which is dedicated to hiding, using distractions, of course. Oh, and of course, killing people for money. You know, Hitman type stuff. And for the pop culture critics, the clue's in the title. And that's transformed by Anita into this.
Game developers set up a series of rules, and then within those rules, we're invited to test the mechanics to see what we can do and what we can't do.
The greenhouse up ahead will require a disguise to infiltrate unnoticed.
We are encouraged to experiment with how the system will react or respond to our inputs, and discover which of our actions are permitted and which are not. These active viewing mechanics encourage players to collaborate with developers in sexual objectification by enabling gamers to scope out and spy on non-playable sex objects.
Now, hiding and spying is part of the game, Anita.
You are now hidden. If enemies did not see you enter, you are safe, even if you decide to peek out.
As is using things for distractions.
Throw the wrench at the buckets to distract the guard.
Hitman Absolution features a mission in which the player can create a diversion by picking up and dumping the dead body of an exotic dancer near police officers. The player cannot help but treat these female bodies as things to be acted upon, because they were designed, constructed, and placed in the environment for that singular purpose.
Bullshit. I can guarantee you that there was no meeting where the producers of this game said, you know what's really sexually appealing to mainstream male gamers? Dead girls. It's not like the game is designed to have those lockers everywhere where you can hide both yourself and the people you've just killed in.
Clean kill. Remember to hide the body. Bodies left in plain sight will alert your enemies. The body is now hidden. The container has room for one more body and still has room for you to hide.
Once a person is reduced to the status of objecthood, violence against that object becomes intrinsically permitted.
So if you objectify a chef in real life, it's okay to kill him and hide his body in the freezer. Right, Anita?
Violability occurs when, as Nussbaum points out, the objectifier treats the object as lacking in boundary integrity, as something that it is permissible to break up, smash, break into.
The body is now hidden. The container has room for one more body and still has room for you to hide.
In-game consequences for these violations are trivial at best, and rarely lead to any sort of fail state or game over. Players are meant to derive a perverse pleasure from desecrating the bodies of unsuspecting virtual female characters. It's a rush streaming from a carefully concocted mix of sexual arousal connected to the act of controlling and punishing representations of female sexuality.
Yeah, I think we've reached the point in this video where she said something that is so functionally retarded that it really has just become its own refutation.
The dehumanization caused by objectification inevitably leads us to the concept of disposability, which is defined as something designed for or capable of being thrown away after being used or used up.
Clean kill. You can dump the body over the railing.
So in this game, the men are just as objectified as the women. There's almost no distinction between them. With a possible obvious exception, if you just take a look at the first mission, that you kill about 14 times as many men, most of them innocent gardeners and chefs and the such like, as you do women. And the woman's the only one who gets any meaningful dialogue in the game.
I should kill you. Why did you do this?
Even you. 47. We used to have honor.
Diana,
No.
Now, sure, we could do the Anita game here, you know, where she's convinced that the game is sexist because the strippers are not real people and you can't get to know them.
Since these women are just objects, there's no need or reason for players to have any emotional engagement with them. Meaningful relationships or interactions are not even possible.
So yeah, let's play that game with this first level of Hitman. All of these people who you've just killed, you had no opportunity to get to know them better, to forge meaningful relationships with them. You never bothered to find out whether they were married, or if they loved their wives or boyfriends, or just how much little Timmy will cry tonight when he finds out that Daddy was strangled behind with cheese wire, then had his clothes stolen and his body dumped into the ocean. No, they're just men. Disposable, faceless men, provided as background in a game as light entertainment. Why? Because it's a fucking game. You know, it's all the subtle giveaways, Anita, that there are no checkpoints in real life. You can't just respawn when you get killed in real life. You can't hunt humans for sport as an insectoid alien in real life. And in real life, there are no special bonuses for running over Elvis impersonators or Hare Krishnas. And in real life, hospitals are a damn sight better way of getting your health back than sleeping with prostitutes. And in real life, it takes a special brand of idiot to not be outraged at hundreds of killings, overwhelmingly men, by strangling, stabbing, shooting, throwing people off cliffs and so on, but then gets completely outraged because one of the dead women happens to be wearing a bikini. Well, that's great, Anita. At least now we know what we can expect from $30,000 of feminist research.